There's a thing called Detroit exceptionalism. It's a state of mind. It's based off of an identity associated with the auto industry and the war industry. I'm not willing to die on that hill. It's just a very oversimplified analogy that I'm using to prove a point. The point being that Detroit exceptionalism is a mindset different from you find anywhere else in the country. It isn't just... It is sort of the mindset that if you're a creative person with new ideas, you are welcomed here. And it isn't just because you could go rags to riches, like Henry Ford or the Dodge brothers, because it's American exceptionalism. It's rather because the auto industry and a lot of the industry here raised the bar for everyone. It improved the living standards of everyone. So anyone who did live here had their living standards high enough that they could pursue their dreams, whatever they are. They had the means to now, their basic needs met. But also the war industry. The city of Detroit and its metropolitan region produced more war goods than any other industrial region in the country, by far, during World War II. They called Detroit the Third Front in this city here. The first two fronts being Europe and Japan, the third front being Detroit, where a lot of the auto factories were converted into making parts for tanks or making parts for bomber planes. After the war, there became this identity of Detroit as the city that won the war. And the big corporations that produced a lot of the war goods were seen as war heroes. Protecting the interests of the corporations was vital for national security. After all, the Soviets were out there. We could be at war again. So we got this weird type of idea that protecting the interests of our biggest corporations and allowing them to be organized like a military unit, corporate structures of top-down authority, like a military unit. Not only was it patriotic and good for national security, but if done right, it's efficient and raises the bar, raises the standard of living for everyone. And these are contradictory ideas. However, that is a lot of policy in Detroit politics. Detroit politicians, Michigan State politicians, make policies that affect your life based off of these two conflicting ideas dominating their mindset and their identity of what it means to be either a Detroiter or from Michigan. If we look at this article from the Huntington Bank website about their not the Huntington Bank website, from the architect, about the new Huntington building in downtown Detroit, it reads a little bit like World War II propaganda if you think of it. Look at it, it says they want to bring about the glory of Detroit's residential past. The past they mean is the glory of the Detroit that won the Second World War. There's a movie, a 1950s timepiece, directed by Edward Norton. It's called Motherless Brooklyn, and in it, Norton says to himself as a character that he'd heard from his mentor about how the war changed America. During the Depression, everybody came together to help each other out, but during the war, the way the country won the war, through great brute strength, would lead to a culture of America thinking that brute strength was the way to solve every problem. That's the legacy of Detroit as a city that won the Second World War, and its industry is having a big role in that, is part of the reason why Michigan policymakers will stick to some courses of economic decision that without changing or to something new, staying on a committed course a lot longer than they should have at this point in time, where other big cities around the country, maybe they have shifted away from their course of economic action, how they make policies regarding economics. They've taken on different courses over the last few decades. But the state of Michigan and Detroit is stuck to the same plans for a long time in a lot of areas, and maybe they should not have. Now, there are conspiracy theory nuts out there who like to make claims like the world is controlled by a master plan someone came up with 300 years ago, and the secret society that came up with that plan has been pulling the strings behind the scenes ever since. I do not believe in that. What I do believe in, though, is maybe about 75 years ago, a lot of the elite power brokers in Detroit came up with a 30 or 50-year long-range plan themselves. However, it was an impractical plan. Very little of it ever got achieved, and there's been multiple ones. There's been multiple master plans for the city of Detroit. 50-year plans, 100-year plan, 25-year plan. In the year 2012, Mayor Dave Banks said the quiet part out loud that in order for Detroit to move forward, the city would have to be shrunk. City services relied on a limited amount of revenue to cover a huge area, much of Detroit being very low in population, where there might be only a handful of people living on one block. The plan was to cut off city services to some neighborhoods that didn't have many people living in them, so people would move to a few core areas and city services could be concentrated in smaller areas. Leftover vacant land would be developed in ways either as flood irrigation ponds or maybe to have new factories put onto them. People went crazy about this, protested it, and officially the plan was dropped. Whatever plans that the Detroit industrial elite once had to remake the landscape of the city, they failed. They couldn't do it as easily after 2006 when Michigan voters chose to add an amendment to the state constitution prohibiting land being taken from people to benefit economic development. A few years ago, an expansion of the Stellantis facility on the east side of Detroit cost much more money and took much more time than the developers wanted to take to acquire all the vacant land in order to do the expansion. I won't get into the details, but behind the scenes what's going on is the city of Detroit is very mismanaged with the records regarding who owns what in the city. I have here a couple of spreadsheets that shows you the problem. So the problem is that oftentimes the easiest way and the quickest way for an entity to figure out who owns something is to go to the property tax office, because whoever's paying the property tax bill is responsible for the property. The name on the deed might be different from the name on the property tax bill. Actually, the city of Detroit has been accused of having its assessor's office allow people to very easily just switch a name on a property tax bill. Say if someone claims that they are renting the house, they don't own it, they live there, they rent it, they'll put their name on the property tax bill because they want to be responsible for it. Because if the landlord doesn't pay it, then they get evicted through no fault of their own. So it's actually pretty easy to switch someone's name on a property tax bill with not much verification. Anyways, the whole process is sloppy. The city of Detroit charges people only $100 or $200 for the standard vacant lot. This was to encourage people to buy up vacant land and develop it and clean up the city. A land value tax would punish those who have worked hard to clean up the city over the years. The land value tax, they say, would make stuff better for everyone. However, it would just encourage development. People who own vacant land would be unable to pay the property taxes, lose it to tax auctions. It would all get bought up by big developers, and then when someone wants to build a factory, instead of going through 100 miscellaneous people to buy the land, they only have to go through 1 or 2 big developers. The city still pushes growth for the Stellantis facility out to the east. However, I-94 takes all the industrial truck traffic from that factory area, and 94 is already overburdened. It can't take any more truck traffic on it. The original freeway plan would have had the freeway for 75 extend along Kirchhoff or Werner Avenue out there, and then go up St. Jane up to 94. This would relieve some of the truck traffic there. Could that still be some of the plans? According to this one business association, maybe. There's been many groups and city council meetings that called for better truck routes for East Detroit, but I haven't this is the only time I've seen someone say specifically Werner Highway should be where that truck route goes.